Well, it seems like the real labor pains are starting. It'll probably take about 10 hours, so you'll likely meet the baby sometime after noon. But don't think you can start slacking off now. Make sure you have the food ready for us, our dear housekeeper.
Overwhelmed by the harsh words of mother-in-law and the intense pain of the contractions, I found myself weakly kneeling on the ground. My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old. My husband James is 34, and we met while working at the same company, eventually getting married. I'm currently on maternity leave, living my days as a full-time housewife. Less than a year into our marriage, we were blessed with a baby. Excitedly, we agreed, since the baby is coming, let's build a house. And so, we built our dream home. Amidst the scent of our new home, my heart was filled with joy and anticipation. We're really building a family. In this house, we'll welcome our new family member. However, at that time, I had no idea that our dream home would soon turn into an intense battlefield. Moving day on the day of our move, my in-laws said they'd come to help. They did indeed help us. But as soon as my father-in-law stepped away, my mother-in-law turned to me.
Give me a spare key to your house, would you?
The moment she asked to keep a key to our house, I was so surprised that I blurted out, "What? Even though she's my mother-in-law, do we really need to give her a key to our house?" As these doubts crossed my mind and I was about to voice my refusal, my husband James spoke up.
Oh, that's fine. Actually, I'm going out to buy some groceries soon. I'll get a spare key made while I'm at it.
He said this casually. Really? I was shocked internally, but seeing my husband and mother-in-law reading this unreasonable request so casually left me confused and staring at my husband.
I've always wanted a lively home where people gather. You're pregnant now, so wouldn't it be reassuring to have supportive people around?
He said this with a smile. I was simply dumbfounded by his words, unsure of how to respond. My bad premonition proved to be true. Mother-in-law started visiting our house every morning at 9 a.m. and she even brought her own laundry.
It doesn't really make a difference whether it's laundry for two or for four. Right.
She handed me a basket full of laundry with a full-faced smile, and while I was putting the laundry in the machine, she urged me,
"Isn't breakfast ready yet?"
I suppressed my irritation and asked, "Perhaps you didn't have your meal at home?" When I asked,
I made sure my husband had a proper meal. He has to get up early for work, after all. But I have some time, so I decided to have breakfast here.
She answered confidently. Her demands are always sudden and suffocating. She strongly insists on having breakfast here. At our house, a normal breakfast usually consists of my early rising husband quickly grabbing some coffee and toast, while I myself just nibble on a little bit of sweet bread. However, when my mother-in-law comes over, I have to prepare additional items like salad and soup. She names this special breakfast and insists on having this lavish meal every weekday morning. Moreover, she eats a full lunch and at dinner time, she says,
Whether it's cooking for two or for four, it only changes the amount of ingredients you use. The actual work is the same. With her unique logic, previously applied to laundry.
She smiles while packing the food I painstakingly made into a container and takes it home. Such a lifestyle has been going on for about 3 months, when one day, I muster up the courage to say, "I've been cooking all this time, but could you possibly help out once in a while?" I decided to ask her to help with preparing dinner. However, her response at that time was,
"Huh, are you trying to order me around, the mother of your husband? Where is your basic respect for your elders?" I was properly taught by my own mother-in-law, a cheeky daughter-in-law who talks back. I will never tolerate. Do what you're supposed to do, quickly.
She unilaterally scolded me, and I was left speechless, unable to talk back. That's when I suddenly realized that she has never called my name, but always you in a more informal and somewhat derogatory way, or this person. While the harsh reprimands from my mother-in-law and mother-in-law reached my ears, my heart and body felt her words from a distance. Even as I engraved her repeated words onto my heart, somewhere inside me, I was trying to forget her existence. In the midst of all this, I gathered my courage and decided to consult with my husband about mother-in-law's behavior. "It's about your mother." As I started, without sensing my anxiety, my husband immediately responded.
There's a saying, experience is the best teacher. I think you should just obediently listen to what my mom says. It's common sense in society, and she's definitely not wrong.
His words did not resonate with me at all. It was as if he was not even trying to understand my worries. In such circumstances, I decided to continue this reluctant lifestyle until the expected delivery date. And then one day, sudden labor pains attacked me. It started in the night and the pain gradually intensified, attacking at regular intervals. I was hardly able to stand, let alone do housework. At this worst possible time, my mother-in-law entered our house without any warning, using her spare key.
What's this? You haven't even started preparing the meal yet. It's too late. Hurry up and get it done.
As usual, she scolded me with her authoritative attitude. Normally, I would begrudgingly exchange at least the minimum greetings, but this time, my body was completely occupied by the pain of labor, and her voice felt distant. Large beads of sweat flowed down my forehead, and drops of sweat fell to the floor. The scene was as if my body was fighting against the labor pains. Please, take me to the hospital. The labor pains. My voice was fragmented due to the pain, and it was extremely difficult to speak.
From the start of labor pains to childbirth, it usually takes about 10 hours. Now is not the time to go to the hospital. Be stronger. You can still do the housework, right? Isn't breakfast ready yet?
I couldn't even respond to her scolding. I was just suffering from the pain. Help me, please. My vision blurred and my consciousness was foggy. At that moment, I clung to my husband's knee as he read the newspaper. However, he closed the newspaper and lightly brushed my hand away.
It takes time from the start of labor pains to childbirth. Mom is right, as she has experience giving birth to 3 children. It's past 9 o'clock, but is breakfast not ready yet?
He said that and left me behind. At that moment, I couldn't bear it any longer. My water broke, and I somehow managed to call an ambulance and was taken to the hospital where I received proper treatment from the medical staff.
It's a healthy baby boy.
After the birth, as I sat in the hospital room in a daze, the nurse spoke to me gently. Her voice was warm and provided a sense of relief.
You should have contacted the hospital when the contractions were 5 minutes apart. You endured too much.
While she scolded me, her gaze was filled with deep comfort and understanding. I expressed my desire to be taken to the hospital to my mother-in-law and my husband, but they told me I could still endure it and didn't listen. As I explained the situation in detail, the nurse sighed with a somewhat troubled expression.
With a mother-in-law and a husband like that, can you really go back home and safely raise your baby?
I couldn't hide my anxiety anymore. She asked me this with sincere concern in her eyes, staring right at me. In front of me, so visibly distressed, the nurse continued speaking with even more kindness.
You are becoming a mother now. Protecting yourself directly protects this little life. For the baby's sake and for your own, please take care of yourself.
Her words solidified my resolve. I felt a new sense of courage as the nurse gently rubbed my back. If a mother isn't in a good state of mind, it affects breastfeeding, responding to the baby's cries at night, and even the ability to shower the baby with love. It all becomes harder. For this little baby and for myself, I vowed to become stronger. I made that promise deep in my heart, clutching my trembling hand as I looked at the baby's tiny hand. When I returned home from the birthing center, the harsh words of my mother-in-law greeted me as usual.
Oh, look, the maid has come back.
The moment I stepped inside the house, she said this sarcastically, smirking at me. But this time, I was different. I had a resolute will inside of me that was 180 degrees different from before. I put down the sports bag filled with my belongings from the hospital with force, stood tall, took a deep breath, and then, with a loud voice that resonated throughout the house, I exclaimed, I am not a maid anymore. Clearly surprised by my sudden shout, mother-in-law twitched, her face contorted in shock. My husband, too, hastily put down his newspaper, staring at me with bated breath. People say respect the old, cherish the new, but do you realize how laughable that is now? Labor pains will last 10 hours. You decided that all on your own, and look where that got me, with this prolonged hospital stay. What does respect the old, cherish the new even mean? Have you just been wasting oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide all this time? I surprised even myself as these strong words came from the depths of my heart. The living room fell silent for a moment. I won't stay silent anymore. I won't just do as others tell me. To protect my child, I first have to protect myself. Just like that, I decided to fight back. And the next day, my husband went to work. We hadn't exchanged a single word since yesterday's incident. Whether he finally understood how cruel it was to treat me like a maid, or he was just shocked that I suddenly fought back, I don't know. But he quietly nibbled on his toast and left the house without saying a word. After my husband left for work, I had about an hour before my mother-in-law was scheduled to visit. I immediately called a locksmith and arranged to have the locks on the front door of my house changed. With this measure in place, my mother-in-law's spare keys were no longer of any use. The clock showed 9 a.m. Right on cue, I heard someone trying to open the front door. The intercom buzzed incessantly, and at the same time, there was a loud banging on the door.
Hey, what are you doing? Why won't you open the door?
At that moment, I could hear my mother-in-law's loud voice from outside.
Enough is enough. This is no time for games.
Without a moment's hesitation, I grabbed my smartphone and called 911. There is someone trying to break into my house. I reported, and police cars arrived quickly, sirens blaring. My mother-in-law's shouts abruptly stopped. She seemed to be talking to the police officers. Later, an officer came to talk to me as well. I maintained that I did not know anything about the situation. Soon after, my mother-in-law was taken away by the police and tranquility returned to the scene. I went back to the living room, let out a sigh of relief, and drank a cup of tea. When my baby started crying, I gently breastfed him, touching his soft skin. I felt from the bottom of my heart that this little life must not be harmed by my mother-in-law. I had become furious at the right moment and made the decision to protect myself and my baby. As night fell and it passed 8 p.m., I heard someone trying to open the front door again. The doorbell rang continuously, and then my phone rang.
What's this about? Can you explain?
It was a call from my husband, James. I've reached my limit with your mother. I changed the lock so she can't get in anymore. I responded calmly but firmly.
Huh? I told you, didn't I? I want a warm home where family and friends can gather.
As he insisted on this, I also said I want a quiet and calm house, a space where our family can relax. You've had your wish for a year, haven't you? So now, it's my turn. Above all, I don't want to raise our baby in a tense atmosphere. I confidently retorted.
Wait a minute. Didn't my mom help us out?
He continued to make excuses. That was a nuisance. Even if you think your mother helped, I am the one to judge that. I stated firmly, I don't quite understand what you mean by respecting elders, but I will never forget being exploited by your mother. Once my maternity leave is over, I intend to go back to work, so there's no need for us to see each other anymore. I'm going to tell everyone at work that I was forced to work until my water broke because of your mother, I declared and hung up the phone. After a short while, hearing the sound of a car engine in the distance, I sensed that my husband had finally given in and was heading towards his parents' house. I refocused on watching TV, prepared to breastfeed the baby if he started crying, and thought about falling asleep while holding the baby in a gentle warmth. Well, this was the flow I had expected. But as expected, the next day, my father-in-law contacted me.
What on earth is going on? Can you talk to me about it?
He asked quietly but earnestly.
I think that if you are this angry, my wife and son must have done something quite serious. However, I have only heard their side of the story, so I want to know the real situation.
I could sense through the phone that my father-in-law was confused, trying to understand the situation. I don't want your wife, especially, to set foot in this house anymore. So, let's meet up on the weekend and talk about this in person, suggested. Upon reflection, this was a disadvantageous situation of 1 against 2, me versus my husband and mother-in-law. However, I have a baby that I must protect. Losing is not an option. I repeated the expected Q&A in my mind over and over again, preparing for the weekend confrontation. Finally, the day came and I headed to my in-laws' house with my baby.
Oh, how adorable.
As my mother-in-law reached out to the baby, I quickly brushed her hand away. Don't touch me. It's your fault that I had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Her stern words took her mother-in-law by surprise, making her eyes widen in shock.
What?
Despite feeling the swirling anger inside of her, she managed to remain calm and talk back. Isn't that what you and your family have been saying to me all this time? Now that the shoes are on the other foot, there's no need for you to be so flustered. I mimicked mother-in-law's harsh words and threw them back in her face.
Wait, ambulance. What are you talking about?
Father-in-law looked confused, as if hearing this for the first time, to which she responded in a clear and determined tone. Actually, because of your wife's actions, I was in a life-threatening situation. When I was in labor and crying for help, she completely ignored me and even had the audacity to ask, "When is the maid going to make dinner?" Eventually, my water broke right there and I had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. I told the truth directly and clearly to father-in-law.
What? Is that true?
Shocked by my words, father-in-law's eyes widened in disbelief. In response, I slammed the ambulance transportation certificate on the table as proof. Here's the proof of what happened. Usually, when someone is transported by an ambulance, they receive an ambulance transportation certificate signed by the fire chief later on. I had prepared this document well in advance for this crucial moment, but her counterattack didn't end there. The real issue here is, I continued to unveil all of the unreasonable behavior I had endured to father-in-law. Eating my special morning breakfasts for free, bringing in their own laundry for me to wash, and other countless outrageous actions. Making me prepare all of dinner and then packing it in container to take back to their own home. I revealed all of these unbelievable actions in detail. Until my water broke, I was continuously treated horribly. I passionately and firmly declared.
I can't believe it. I left for work early every morning, so I was almost completely unaware of this.
Stunned and disappointed by my revelation, father-in-law's shoulders sank heavily.
But I always had this vague feeling that I might have been eating the food you cooked.
He spoke the words heavily and with apparent difficulty.
My wife and I have been married for over 40 years. Throughout all this time, I have been eating the meal she makes. So, I clearly noticed when the taste of her cooking suddenly changed. However, she told me she tried changing her cooking style a bit, and I believed her. I firmly believe that the one that should never happen between a married couple is lying to each other.
Listening to father-in-law's words, I couldn't help but feel that even if he was unaware of the situation, as a partner in marriage, he was also an accomplice. But your wife herself said, I also had a hard time with my mother-in-law when I was younger. Doesn't that mean that you, too, just silently watched as your own wife was being mistreated by her mother-in-law? Just like what my husband is doing to me right now. And with that, I sternly confronted father-in-law.
What?
Surprised by my words, father-in-law momentarily recoiled, then weakly shook his head from side to side. He began to speak in a calm tone.
My mother, your grandmother-in-law, had already passed away by the time I got married.
I couldn't hide my surprise at his words. Is that really true? Something stirred inside me, creating confusion. The stories my mother-in-law had told me about her mother-in-law were not all true. So, does that mean it's accurate to interpret this as you being covered in lies, making me the victim here? I asked, looking for a response from father-in-law. He slowly lowered his gaze amidst a heavy silence.
That's right.
At that moment, a look of resentment and sympathy appeared on my face. I took a deep breath and steeled myself to speak harshly to my mother-in-law. Do you really think it's acceptable to barge into our home, treat me like a housekeeper under the guise of being a daughter-in-law, and use me as you please? Raising a child in such a cold, heartless environment is absolutely impossible for me. Hey, are you even listening to me? I'm talking to you, you lying and spiteful woman. At that moment, I had stopped calling her mother-in-law. Just calling her this woman or you was enough. And then father-in-law continued speaking quietly, yet powerfully.
My wife's lies are absolutely inexcusable, but there is also a serious responsibility on my son, who has turned a blind eye to it all.
Hearing this, I understood that the blame was also being directed at her husband. Neither my husband nor my mother-in-law could say anything back. They just silently accepted my words. The two of you are nothing but harmful to the growth of our future baby. Protecting myself directly leads to protecting the baby. To protect my child, I made up my mind and chose the path to completely resolve this issue. Let's end everything here, I strongly thought to myself as I took out a piece of green paper that I had prepared in advance. And then, I decided to go back to work. I planned to talk about the terrible treatment I received from my ex-husband and former mother-in-law with my colleagues when I returned to work. However, by the time I returned, my husband had already left the company. He probably left out of fear of becoming the subject of rumors. Moreover, my mother-in-law was divorced by my father-in-law. Her long history of lying to her husband and her continued bullying of me ultimately provoked my father-in-law's strong sense of justice, leading him to push her away.
Don't you ever show your face in front of me again.
With those stern words from my father-in-law, she moved far away. After that, peaceful days returned to our family life. From time to time, my father-in-law visits, and every time he sees his grandchild's face, he smiles.
How adorable, so tiny.
When I showed my son the toy I brought as a souvenir, he laughed happily. I truly wanted to protect this small, adorable smile from the bottom of my heart. I hope he grows up healthy, strong, and resilient. And we named our son Holly, inspired by a tree full of vitality, with a sturdy and flexible trunk.